final week of the Prismatic Draft League regular season. For most teams, this is the last chance to improve their seeding or build some momentum before the playoff bracket. And for a handful of teams, this is the end of the road for now. But I'm certainly hopeful that everyone or nearly everyone will be back next season. And I won't say too much about that right now, but I know behind the scenes tiering is already underway, so next season might well be soon, and it could have an interesting format. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. There's still this season to wrap up, and like I said, there is still one more week of play for all teams until the knockout bracket gets started. First, the standings at the end of week 7, heading into week 8. If you watched the first video of this week, you have already seen the Halifax Masquerade men defeat the Alberta Arcanine. We will finish the season at 5-3, and we were already, I think, locked for a playoff spot, but yeah, we shored up that position a little bit. Can't complain, right? But for everyone else, it remains to be seen how things will shake out in the end over these last few sets. The peaceful Porygons have been sitting in first place for a long time now, and with one more win, they can guarantee sole possession of the best record in the league. But also there are a few teams breathing down their necks, potentially able to catch up to them. We might start to see some separation between these three teams down here. In fact, I'm just going to leak right now. We'll get to the set soon that the Porygons play the Farmboys this week, so there definitely will be some movement at the top here. And then we have a few more teams clumped together down here, right? Still a lot of storylines, still a lot to watch, and I'm going to jump to the trades right now. I'm not going to lie, I almost forgot to include trades again in the first take of this video, just like last week, even though this time I actually made the images way in advance. It's been a relatively quiet trading season, but the trade deadline was at the end of week 7, and we do have a few more trades, the last few of the season heading into week 8. Cryptic Cryogonals have dropped Sceptile and picked up Sarina. To me, this makes a lot of sense. Sceptile was a Pokemon that they never really got going. It's a Pokemon that definitely has some interesting tools on paper. It's fast, it gets Unburden, it gets Shed Tail. Its offensive stats are not great, but they're not like nightmarishly bad either. But yeah, I'd say it had some trouble finding a sort of defined role on this team. And I don't necessarily know that Sarina does a lot for this team either. This isn't a team that's especially vulnerable to priority, I think. Although, if they were to, if we met again in playoffs or something, maybe I'd want to Aqua Jet the Arcanine, maybe somebody else could land a strong priority hit onto the Gardevoir or something. So Sarina bringing Queenly Majesty, I don't know that it's the most useful to this team, but it's possible something comes of it. But I think more importantly, Sarina it has a little bit more value in where its stats are distributed. I'm not actually sure what its attack stat is, but I think it hits somewhat harder than Sceptile. It gets some interesting support moves like Knockoff. It can make good use of an Assault Vest. So it's a grass type that might be able to play a little bit more of a clearly defined and stronger role than Sceptile does, independent of the main reason to use it in most formats, which is Queenly Majesty. But again, you never know when that could come in handy too. And given that Sceptile just wasn't really working for this team, I think, it makes a lot of sense to give Sarina a try. Up next, the Falinks have dropped Venomoth and picked up Exeggutor. I feel like we didn't see Venomoth very often this season. Definitely showed up at least once or twice. And they tried to build some game plans around it, but it kind of got... I remember it getting overwhelmed one week and not really being able to put in work, even as it looked like they were trying to position it to do that. Now, Ninja Meerkat, one of the two coaches of the Falinks, has been talking about in the Discord about playing this team more aggressively as the season went on, and yeah, finding that it was more successful with more offensive game plans. I can see Venomoth not necessarily fitting into that game plan. I'm not exactly sure what Exeggutor brings to this team. Ninja Meerkat is a regular viewer, so maybe you can talk in the comments about what you were thinking here, but it is it is a grass type that hits. So it's thwacky. It can be a strong grass type, but it's a little bit situational in how it plays. Exeggutor gives them a grass type to group with Tauros, and I guess their fire type is Oricorio. Maybe they're not that focused on that core, but whatever. Exeggutor hits somewhat hard. It can play in Sun if they want. This isn't a Sun team, but there are ways to manually set it up, or opponents might set it up. But either way, Exeggutor is a pretty respectable special attack stat. I'm pretty sure it can do some support stuff with Leech Seed. It even can put things to sleep if you want. I think it gets Hypnosis. So it's definitely a Pokemon that I don't entirely see the vision, but it could definitely put in some work in the right circumstances. And of course, having Thwacky paired with it can give it grassy terrain to boost its grass type attacks that much higher. I'm just spitballing here. I don't know what game plans they have in mind for this Pokemon, but there are definitely some ways that it can put in work. Finally, these are the last trades of the season. The regional Reshurams have dropped Chandelure and Toxapex and have picked up Cinderace and Riolu. It's a very interesting duo right off the bat, right? Because while we saw that Riolu can be much more versatile last season, where it was even taking some KOs itself in some game states, the number one thing I think that most players think about when they're considering how to use Riolu is the combination of Prankster and Coaching. So you get priority, attack boost, and defense boost into a teammate. And right away, Cinderace is one of their Pokemon that can best take advantage of that, being a fast physical attacker. It also makes the Gallade even scarier than it already was. I'd say those are the... Actually, the Braviary is an interesting partner for Riolu as well, because we've seen Braviary do a lot of damage in multiple weeks of this season, but sometimes miss some KOs, even with a Sky attack into Acrobatics, the way that they've liked to play it before. So I think that Riolu could very well be the Pokemon that puts Braviary over the top in some matchups and gets them some KOs that they were missing. Plus, we know that this team loves to bring Gallade. Gallade gets so much scarier with coaching support. And like I said, so does Cinderace. And you know Riolu will get the coaching off before Cinderace attacks, even though Cinderace is very fast, because Riolu has Prankster. That is, again, not all that Riolu can do, but it's pretty useful by itself, and I think it justifies this trade pretty well, especially given that they gave up Toxapex for it, and I don't know that Toxapex was ever really bringing very much to the table. That said, dropping Chandelure is interesting to me. I've talked up the Reshiram's ability to run a Trick Room game plan with Gallade and Chandelure as attackers that complement each other well. One hitting hard on the physical side and the other on the special side, and their coverage pairing fairly nicely together. That said, the Reshurams, the way they actually play their sets, they always seem kind of reluctant to commit very hard to a Trick Room game plan. I'm not sure that's what this coach was most comfortable with. And so I feel like we never really saw the Gallade and Chandelure get going together all the way to their full potential. And this trade definitely commits harder to a particular direction to this team than the way that they were playing before, right? They still can do Trick Room stuff with Porygon 2, Gallade, Amoonguss, Primarina if they want, but by turning one of their strongest special attackers into one of their strongest physical attackers and then adding a coaching bot next to it, I think it makes a lot of sense because they've given this team that much more power in a specific game plan that's going to warp the matchups that they get. It's going to force opponents to adjust to stopping Gallade and Cinderace. And those are very strong Pokemon. With coaching support, they might just break through some matchups anyway. But then, if not, you still have the likes of Porygon 2 and Primarina to contend with. So I definitely do think that, although it's a little bit of sort of compromising one side of the balance of their team to boost another one, I think this does net out to making this team much stronger and more dangerous going into the rest of the, what's left of the season. That said, we won't be seeing the regional Reshurams in action this week. As always, real life flares up for people sometimes, and late in the season it seems like a few people have been running into some situations in their offline lives, and you know, priorities are what they are, plus the playoff field is pretty well set at this point anyway. I believe going into these sets it is theoretically possible for the Chatots to catch the Reshurams and tie for that last playoff spot, and I don't know what happens if that happens, but otherwise the playoff field is set, and so there are a couple of forfeits this week. We will only be watching 3 sets in this video. Those are the ones that were played for Week 8, other than mine, which I've covered already. So don't be surprised if this is a little bit shorter than most, but that's all the trades covered, so let's just jump into the first set right now. And as promised, we do have the Peaceful Porygons taking on the Varsity Farmboys. The Farmboys bringing that oh-so-scary duo of Greninja and Archaludon. They also have the Greninja and Venusaur, and I could definitely see... I feel like I talk up the Pledge combo way more often than they actually use it, but I could definitely see it being valuable here to slow down Charizard, which otherwise just hits so hard, especially if the Porygons get Sun Up, that it's a massive threat to Archaludon, especially since Archaludon doesn't boost its special defense. I mean, it can run an Assault Vest, but the Greninja Water Shuriken combo only helps it take physical hits, and it's not going to hold up very long, I would think, against Weather Balls or Overheats from Charizard. But with the Swamp combo, they can slow Charizard down. Greninja and Archaludon can offensively threaten it, if that's the way they want to play. That said, I'm not at all surprised to see the Blissey here, because I think that's really their best chance of taking a hit from Charizard, and I had Blissey in a PDL season once, but I've kind of lost track of what it can do back at this point. I think it probably still gets Thunderwave, but also we've seen them run Calm Mind Blissey before, and that might be like the one kind of special boosting Pokemon that's actually able to set up on this Charizard. The Comfey, I think Comfey makes sense to help keep Blissey and our Chaladon healthy. That's what I always say, right? I always zero in on the priority floral healing. The way this team has actually played Comfey this season has tended to be more of a Calm Mind setup win con in its own right, which I've had mixed feelings about because it looks very cool when it works, but Comfey is balanced for its very strong ability by not having great stats, and we have seen the setup Comfey just be too slow and not hit hard enough at times. And especially in the face of this Charizard and Ursaluna, and even Indeedee and Hitmonlee, just massive offensive threats on the other side. I honestly will be surprised if we see a Calm Mind Comfey setting up this week, so this might actually be the dedicated support Comfey that I've been expecting all season, that's just here to keep our Chaladon and Blissey alive in the face of these threats. But we'll see, maybe it's not. They've really seemed to like the Calm Mind Comfey so far. And Comfey will get a power boost if it's next to Charjabug. So will actually all of these Pokemon could be hitting hard with special attacks, even Blissey if it's a Calm Mind set. So Charjabug, I don't necessarily know how it fits into this game plan, but it might be the key to them having enough offense to shut down, to break through the Porygons before they get overwhelmed by all this damage. That said, there's a ton of damage coming back the other way, and if you're the Farmboys, you do have to, I think very carefully about how you want to even lead into this in Game 1. The Blissey might be able to stop the Charizard, but the Charizard is going to do a ton of damage to anything, at least to Blissey, but anything else on this team I think will probably just melt, unless Greninja can get rid of it quickly. But there's probably a Terra type to cover for just a Water Shuriken into Charizard or something like that. Our Chaladon's not going to stand up well to it, neither is Comfey, I would think. Ursaluna, you can set up our Chaladon with Water Shuriken to try to stop that Pokemon. You can outspeed it with Greninja and Venusaur, but if it starts getting attacks off, it's going to shred a lot of this team. We have the duo of Indeedee and Hitmonlee again. And actually, I keep talking up the Water Shuriken, but they have brought the Gastrodon, so you can't even side Water Shuriken safely in front of that because Storm Drain will redirect it. So if you're the Farmboys, I think you probably bring Blissey to Game 1. Probably not in lead, but yeah, it might be harder to get. A lot of the other possible game plans kind of run through Greninja. Swamp Combo, setting up our Chaladon. I've been sleeping on this Gastrodon sitting here while I've talked about this. It might actually be fairly hard to get anything going from the lead position when the Gastrodon is being threatened like this, but we'll see. It is our Chaladon and Greninja leading against Indeedee and Hitmonlee. Pokemon I focused on least, I'd say, on the Porygon side. But actually, you know what? Yeah, I kind of have. I've talked up so much of what the Farmboys can do at preview, but the Porygons actually have a ton of counters to most of their possible game plans, right? Hitmonlee, first of all, the Psychic Terrain from Indeedee means that you can't click Water Shuriken into this team, except funnily enough into Charizard or Jumpluff because they're flying types, and they're immune to the terrain effect at least before Terra. But priority attacks into Robbie's team are shut down here. And Hitmonlee with Unburden will be, I would expect, the fastest Pokemon on the board. Yeah, surely it is. And is immediately threatening strong fighting type attacks into both of these Pokemon. So, as scary as the Greninja has been, and we saw that last week for our Masquerain Men, this is a really difficult lead, actually, for Greninja to deal with. Hitmonlee actually switching right out to Gastrodon. Chaladon goes Terra Flying. But yeah, Greninja, I'm guessing, went for the side Water Shuriken there. Funnily enough, Gastrodon actually doesn't get a boost from it because the Psychic Terrain just stops the priority attack. So the attack is redirected, but then it also fails. But yeah, our Chaladon will not be getting any defense boosts from this. Body Press doesn't do too terribly much to Indeedee. We see a Trick Room. And now Gastrodon attacking their Chaladon with an Ice Beam. Doesn't do a ton. Indeedee's Expanding Force knocks it down further, though. Gastrodon does get to +2 defense from those attacks, so it's able to knock out Indeedee, but... Oh, and the Greninja showing Grass Knot. That's a cool tech. After the Citrus Berry, though, Gastrodon has a little bit more than half HP left. Now we see Ursaluna, which I think we were expecting once we saw the Trick Room go up, right? It's Terra Ghost, so it'll be immune to the Body Press. Gastrodon just protecting, wants to stay on the field probably as long as it can. An unboosted Facade, meaning Ursaluna doesn't have a status problem, it doesn't have Guts active yet. But, so just base 70 power Facade, still does a lot to Greninja. And now Ursaluna gets the burn. Clear Smog removes the defense boost from the Archaludon, which of course has turned off its steel typing. A lot of interesting techs already in this set. No wonder these two teams are at the top of the standings going in, yeah, it seems like they've brought multiple layers of counters for each other. This is going to be a fun one to watch. So let's get back to watching it. Greninja goes down here. Body Press does knock out Gastrodon, though. And there's only one turn left of Trick Room and one turn left of Psychic Terrain. Now it's the Blissey. Again, I think it makes sense that they brought the Blissey, right, to be their only decent answer to Charizard if that gets going. And we see that it's Room Service Blissey, actually, so it's ready to play in Trick Room as well, but it's hard to see what's going to do in the face of these two very strong physical attackers. It's running Charm, okay. Room Service Blissey underspeeds Ursaluna and hits it with Charm. That is such a good tech from the Varsity Farm Boys. I love that, because if you actually manage to accumulate some boosts on Archaludon, or even if you're trying to set Comfey up, if it is a setup Comfey this week, slowing the Ursaluna down like that is so valuable, and it gives Blissey something to do outside of positions where it's facing the Charizard. I keep talking about Blissey as the Charizard answer because I don't really see any other Charizard answer on this team except to offensively threaten it with Greninja. But you don't want to get Blissey into a position where, you know, you're facing other extremely threatening Pokemon and it can't really do anything against them. So the Charm Room Service Blissey is so cool to see here. That said, Ursaluna still knocks out Archaludon at low HP and only +1 defense. Close Combat takes out Blissey. There's not a ton that Blissey can do in front of these two Pokemon. It kind of just is what it is for that Pokemon. We see the Venusaur is last. No Trick Room and no Psychic Terrain, but Hitmonlee is faster. It chips it with a Poison Jab, and that means Ursaluna. After taking the sleep, Hitmonlee takes a Sleep Powder. That means there's no action into Ursaluna, so Ursaluna is free to get the KO with Facade. And so as much as I love the building on both sides, genuinely, these are some really cool teams that they both brought. The Porygons do just kind of overwhelm in Game 1. And I mean, this is what they do, right? They just have so many threats in every possible matchup. It's really hard to cover for everything. And you have to get this exactly right if you're playing against this team. So let's see if the Farm Boys can get it exactly right in Game 2. Archaludon and Greninja leading again against, this time, Jumpluff and Charizard. The Porygons mixing it up as they've been so good at throughout the season. And here's the Blissey again. Here mainly to switch in on the Charizard. We see Terra Steel Jumpluff, but it gets taunted. But it has a Mental Herb, so that's fine. Sets the Tailwind up. Now, of course, since Greninja doesn't have Prankster, Jumpluff can set Sunny Day if it wants before getting taunted again. But it actually just goes straight for a Leaf Storm, which almost KOs Greninja, not quite. But Greninja will drop to this Heat Wave from Charizard. Blissey does start setting up Calm Mind, so it is a Calm Mind Blissey. Okay, I think that makes sense in this position. But if there's something like Hitmonlee in the back again, or Ursaluna, then Blissey might find itself under too much pressure, right? So it's definitely tricky for the Farm Boys, and that's before this Archaludon gets just one-shot by a Sun-boosted Overheat. This Charizard has been so good all season. I'm pretty sure it's... I haven't paid close attention to the stats, but I'm pretty sure it's the season KO leader. And once again, we can see why. Now it's Venusaur. I would assume with Chlorophyll to take advantage of the opponent's Sun. Jumpluff switches out to Indeedee, but actually Charizard going first. We know it's not Scarfed because it's protected, and it switched moves. It's even used 2 different attacks here. So is it not Chlorophyll Venusaur? Oh no, they have Tailwind, I forgot. They have Tailwind up, so that's why Charizard is faster. Almost knocks out Venusaur with a -2 Heat Wave. And then dodges a Sleep Powder. You can say that's lucky, but I mean, the Porygons are just overwhelming the Farm Boys here. And okay, the Venusaur is gone. The Calm Mind Blissey did sit here and set up on Charizard, but Charizard has removed all of its teammates. And this is the thing, right? Blissey is not immediately an offensive threat, and especially not if it keeps just sitting there and setting up. And so I keep talking up Blissey as being able to wall Charizard. That would be extremely important in a single battle, but in doubles, your Pokemon has to have some kind of field presence beyond that, right? And so Charizard is not threatening Blissey, really, but Blissey has also not been doing anything especially threatening to Charizard, and that means Charizard has been free to knock out all of the other Pokemon on the Farm Boys side of the field, and it's all up to Blissey now to win the game for them, and we still haven't seen the last Pokemon in the back for the Porygons, but my guess is that it's Hitmonlee, given that we've seen Jump Left Charizard and Indeedee so far. So Blissey might beat Charizard, but then... Oh, actually, Indeedee setting Trick Room tells me it's probably Ursaluna in the back. But either way, that last Pokemon can probably beat Blissey, right? When Blissey has no support. And if you're the Porygons, you can kind of just wait until Charizard goes down here. Just keep chipping the Blissey. Make it hard for it to get comfortable. It might even be forced to heal, like so. And it's going to be all the harder for it to position itself against... It's actually Life Orb Charizard. I should have picked up on that sooner. But that means Charizard is knocked out here, and we're probably going to see Ursaluna coming in with still 2 turns of Trick Room left. Here's the Ursaluna. It just switches out to Jump Bluff, though, on an Ice Beam. Indeedee reverses the Trick Room. Now Ursaluna's back. Oh! Because of the Room Service Blissey. Right, the Blissey is slower than Ursaluna once its item is active. So what Robbie has done here is use Trick Room to make the Blissey slower, and then turn off the Trick Room so that in normal dimensions, Ursaluna is faster than Blissey. That's pretty clever. And Ursaluna gets its burn here. Blissey charms the Jump Bluff slot. That's the other benefit to switching around for Robbie. And we see this Terra Fairy Blissey, so it would be able to, I would imagine, to take a hit from Hitmonlee at this point. But it has nothing to stand up to Ursaluna. And the Peaceful Porygons pretty decisively break through this bulky core from the Farmboys. They will finish the season 7-1, sole possession of first place, #1 seed in the playoffs. And I think we've seen from since week 1 that this team was enormously threatening. And yeah, they will go into the playoffs firmly established as the team to beat. They just have so much powerful offense between Charizard and Ursaluna alone, to say nothing of the other Pokemon that they can mix in. There are just so many layers of threats with this team every single week, and we see that even the Farmboys that I've been talking up all season were, at least in this matchup, unable to break through. But it's entirely possible that we see a playoff rematch between these two teams, and you know that one's going to be interesting because they already brought a lot of very creative techs and in-game decisions to this set. I think it's only going to get better if they meet again. But we've got a couple more sets to cover here. Up next is the Cryptic Cryogonals taking on the Azure Bay Chatots. The Cryogonals bringing a lot of the Pokemon that we're used to. No Crocodile this week, and it does kind of feel... I think I read something in the Discord that planted this idea in my head, but it does kind of feel like after Crocodile got going very early in the season, the Cryogonals have made a deliberate effort not to rely too heavily on it and have pivoted to... getting Pokemon like Gardevoir, Gyarados, and Arcanine to put in a lot of work as well, which makes sense. You want to keep your team well-rounded, right? You want to have, again, many layers of threats, and the Cryogonals have been doing that very well throughout the season, and are definitely on my radar as another very strong championship contender. But we'll see how they close out the regular season now. And reminder, as always, you can see a first-person point of view of this set on the channel, Reckless Trico. That is the coach of the Cryptic Cryogonals, Reckless Trico. They upload all their sets on their channel. They've been doing it longer than I have. That's partly where I got the idea. So be sure to check that out. I'll try to remember to link it in the description. But what's really interesting to me is this Magneton is here this week. We haven't seen that Pokemon in a while. It'd be interesting to see what it can do here. Magneton, a stronger special attacker than you might think. Remember, it used to be a fully evolved Pokemon in the first 3 generations, and it, to some extent, has the stats of one. But yeah, we'll see if that puts in some work this week. On the other side, the Chatots, they've brought Meowstic and Slacking. I think Meowstic gets Skill Swap, so it can get, if I'm right, it can get a priority Skill Swap into Slacking, give Slacking Prankster, and then Slacking can attack every turn. That'd be very cool to see if it gets going. I'm not sure what the rest of this mix of Pokemon does. I mean, Quagsire can make life a fair bit harder for Gyarados and Arcanine, who are both here, as well as Crocodile, who isn't. Actually, as a ground type, Quagsire has some kind of beneficial matchup into a lot of this team. Pretty much everything except the Gardevoir. So it could be annoying for Trico to remove, although I'm sure Trico has teched something for it. Corviknight... Well, it can bounce back Intimidates with the Mirror Armor, so that's something. And then Stantler and Sudowoodo are an interesting duo, suggesting maybe a Trick Room component to this team, but I feel like all season I've been saying, I don't know what Sudowoodo does, and then when it shows up to a game, it doesn't really do anything, but we'll see if that's different this time. So it is Slacking and Stantler lead, okay, against Kilowattrel and Klefki. Frisk Stantler, so we see that Sash Kilowattrel and Covert Cloak Klefki. Kilowattrel goes straight for a Terra Water. In the rain, Klefki setting Rain Dance. Weather Ball does a lot to Slacking. It's not a KO. High Horsepower back into Klefki isn't a KO either. It's Life Orb Slacking though, so it can only attack a couple more times in this game. Stantler sets Trick Room. Slacking switches out to Quagsire. Metal Sound on the Klefki. Prankster Metal Sound, lowering special defense stats so that Kilowattrel and Gardevoir and even Magneton can just blast through the opposing team that much more effectively. I don't think, if the Metal Sound connects, which it doesn't this turn, I don't think that very much is taking these strong special attacks back on the Chatots side. So that's, you have to be careful, I guess, about clicking Metal Sound into Corviknight, but that's really cool to see this week for sure. That said, they get a light screen up on the Chatots side, and the Metal Sound misses, and Quagsire switches in on a Thunderbolt, so decent positioning there. We see Thunder Wave from the Klefki into Stantler. Of course, Trick Room is up, but a full para is always a possibility. Kilowattrel just protecting here. And then Gyarados coming in. Yeah, it doesn't take too much from Stantler's -1 double edge. Quagsire will finish Klefki off here. Kilowattrel's back in on the last turn of Trick Room. It can just protect through it along with Gyarados. Wild Charge Stantler. Not ideal, probably, to reveal that attack when you're hitting a Protect, but we'll see if it can still do something. And it may get the chance, because it takes those hits pretty well. But it just sets Trick Room back up. Okay, fair. But this is a very sort of... Reckless Trico is kind of grinding out a slower game here. Stantler and Quagsire are very cool Pokemon to see in this set, but especially after taking the Intimidate, they're not doing a ton of damage, so they're not really making the most of the Trick Room turns. Trico didn't have too much trouble stalling out Trick Room the first time, and I don't know that it'll be any different the second time. Although I guess the Stantler is threatening Wild Charge into this Gyarados. Well, not anymore. It remains to be seen how much that would have done. Maybe we'll find out in another game. Now we see the Arcanine come in. It's not running Intimidate, which makes sense in the Corviknight matchup, so it's either Flash Fire or more likely Rock Head. I wouldn't be surprised to see this Arcanine hitting things with Flare Blitz and Head Smash. I think it gets Head Smash, but it's not doing any of that this game as it switches in on a Waterfall. But removing the Gyarados is still a problem for the Chatots. That said, there's still 2 turns of Trick Room left, and Trico is running out of room to protect through it. Chatot still, or the Slacking still has Truant though. If the Slacking didn't have Truant there, this actually might have been a pretty bad position for Trico, but I think it's still okay, probably. As Trick Room will end again, Slacking shouldn't be able to take much more damage. We see Corviknight is the last Pokemon, so that's going to be threatened by Kilowattrel. However, Kilowattrel is having trouble damaging the Quagsire. I think we can assume that it doesn't have Air Slash, as it goes for a normal Weather Ball. Corviknight's not taking much from that, and actually, you do have a bit of a mind game here, as Reckless Trico has one attack that really threatens the Corviknight, but does nothing to the Quagsire, and has to maybe try to read how Mario Man will switch around, except not really, because the Slacking is at such low HP. If that gets knocked out, Mario Man can't switch around at all anymore. So I guess that's the target if you're Reckless Trico. But we actually see a Temper Flare coming out from Gyarados, does some decent damage to the Corviknight. Quagsire is switching into the other slot now, on a Thunderbolt. Oh, actually, okay. I'm actually downplaying the Quagsire a little bit. It's not only a Thunderbolt immunity, it's also a Waterfall immunity. And in fact, it's healed by Waterfall, thanks to Water Absorb. So, even removing the Slacking is not as simple as I made it sound. Mario Man is having to position this extremely carefully, but is actually making this team very hard to break. Again, if the Slacking goes down, it gets a lot simpler for Reckless Trico, but the Quagsire being able to switch in and out like this is making it hard for Trico to knock anything out. After getting that one big hit into Stantler earlier. Now we see Terra Dragon Corviknight. So that'll take Thunderbolt and Temper Flare a lot better than before. Trico may be anticipating a switch there, but And Kilowattrel, no longer an electric type, drops to a Brave Bird. Gyarados, Gyarados is very well positioned defensively in this matchup, but I don't think it can hold up to all of this pressure. And so I really thought Trico had the favorable position here, but Mario Man played that extremely well. Again, preserving the slacking, I think was a very good call there. And the Quagsire was just way too difficult to remove. I mean, yeah, once it got Arcanine on the switch, what happened there again? What's Arcanine's nickname? Family Sedan. The fourth wheel is Kilowattrel. So Mario Man clicked Waterfall into a Water-type Kilowattrel. Had caught Arcanine on the switch. And that was maybe kind of the turning point in this game, because the Quagsire was just so difficult for Reckless Trico to remove after that. I mean, I'm not sure how the Arcanine would have done it either, but I did say a preview that the Quagsire could be a problem in this matchup, but still I underestimated it. And yeah, the Azurbe Chatots playing extremely well here and taking game 1. But it's still going to be tricky for both sides in game 2. We see now Stantler and Slacking leading against the guys and Gardevoir. And I'm pretty sure that this nickname is directed at Reckless Trico this time, because this set will be uploaded there, but it is also appearing on this channel, so you know the rules. Say hi back, don't be rude. Okay, Eviolite Magneton and Life Orb Gardevoir. Gardevoir just folds immediately to a Slacking Double Edge, so who's to say what kind of set it's running, other than one that it wants to do a lot of damage. But Magneton just clicked Steel Beam and knocked Slacking out right back. Steel Beam is not a move that you think about too often, at least if you're me. Of course, debuted in Generation 8, I think, and it works like Mind Blown, right? Mind Blown is Blacephalon's fire-type attack that does huge damage at the cost of half of its HP. Steel Beam does the same thing. I think a bunch of Steel types learned it. I don't really know. It's not a move that I think about very much, but it's extremely powerful, and again, Magneton, formerly a fully evolved Pokemon, has a very respectable special attack stat, so the Steel Beam Magneton, I'm not sure I would have seen that coming in Mario Man's position. I don't think I would have, but it does just blast this Slacking into the Shadow Realm. And we'll see what Mario Man has in the back. We do see the Trick Room go up again, and here's the Sudowoodo against Arcanine. Probably not the worst position for Mario Man. Arcanine's switching out to Gyarados. And it's Terra Water Magneton. It'll take that Drain Punch very well, actually, with the Eviolite. We see now that Gyarados takes a little bit more than half. I meant to pause there, not sure what happened. Gyarados takes a little bit more than half from a -1 Wild Charge. So it's not incredible damage, but the Stantler definitely can be threatening. Although the Gyarados is back over half after taking its berry. And the Terra Water Magneton also running, not Weather Ball, running Terra Blast, but also able to Terra Water and take advantage of the rain, like we saw from the Kilowattrel in Game 1. Knocks Sudowoodo down to Sturdy, and then switches out to Arcanine. Of course, the Arcanine is not running Intimidate, so they can't really weaken these attacks yet more by doing that, but the Stantler is just not hitting very hard, right? Wild Charge into Arcanine, probably trying to catch the Magneton. Doesn't do very much damage at all. Magneton back in now. Reckless Trico pivoting around this Trick Room very nicely. Even Magneton with the Eviolite doesn't take that much damage from a super effective, but -1 Wild Charge from a Stantler. And the Sudowoodo has gone to an extreme speed. We see Corviknight in the back. Arcanine pivoting out. I don't think we've seen Arcanine's item, have we? But on this set, I would think it's probably a Choice Band. No, I don't think they let Arcanine either game, so we won't have seen its item. But yeah, probably has to switch out to be able to switch moves and threaten this Corviknight properly. But there's still Gyarados available for that. Gyarados will take the Intimidate itself here, but I think that's okay. I don't think Gyarados is the win con that you're playing toward if you're Trico at this point. And the Trick Room ends here. We see the Terra Dragon Corviknight again. In a way, though, that makes Arcanine's life easier when it comes back in, because you don't have a mind game if you're Reckless Trico on whether you should click Flare Blitz. That they've already resolved that for you by Terastallizing right now. That said, it's probably doing that so it can take something like a Temper Flare from Gyarados, or even just a Waterfall more effectively. So, tricky position for both sides. Magneton will sacrifice itself to get another Steel Beam off, this time into Stantler, but it doesn't quite manage to deny the Trick Room. But Arcanine is, the other thing about Corviknight terrestrializing is it no longer resists extreme speed, so Arcanine is safe to click that, knock Stantler out, and I don't think it's likely that Corviknight overpowers both of these very strong Pokemon on the other side. We'll see how much the... Oh, is it not Banded Arcanine? No, it's not. Gyarados goes down. Arcanine knocks Corviknight out, or not knocks Corviknight out, but damages it with a head smash. And then Extreme Speed finishes it off. So what do I think Arcanine's item is? I don't know. I thought it was Choice until now. If you're Mario Man, maybe you thought so too. And so that head smash was kind of an unpleasant surprise for you there. But yeah, Reckless Trico with some kind of surprise tech on the Arcanine, taking down game 2. But this has been a great back and forth, very positional set so far. I do believe that losing that game officially ends any chance that the Azure Bay Chatots have to make the playoffs. I believe that the only way they could tie for 8th place was if they won 2-0, so we won't have to worry about any further tiebreakers and what those might or might not be. Despite still being alive in the set at this point, the Chatots, like I said, I think have officially missed the playoffs just by losing one game this week. But there's still game 3 to play. They still can finish. They still can close this out strong. Let's see how it goes. Stantler and Slacking leading against Magneton and Gyarados. Eviolite Citrus Berry, we know. Oh, whoa! Slacking, despite its overall demeanor, actually a fairly fast Pokemon. I mean, I don't think it's crazy fast by Gen 9 standards. It was fast in Gen 3, but its speed stat is no joke. And it is the fastest Pokemon on the field here. And I don't know, I'm so used to Trick Room being the last move in basically any situation. I know there are other ways that people have found to overcome its like -7 priority. Like I think Wolf Glick had a short recently where he talked about how he used to use, in Gen 8, he used to use Max Guard and Prankster Copycat to get priority Trick Room. But yeah, I also didn't know that Slacking learns after you. It never crossed my mind for 1 second that they could use it to get Trick Room up before the opponent moves like this. That's a great tech. It does come at the cost, though, of a lot of damage to Slacking from that Steel Beam. But they get the Trick Room up before Gyarados can taunt Stantler. So that's some good stuff from the Chatots there. Yeah, I didn't know it got after you either. Wild Charge, we've seen what that does to Gyarados already. It's non-trivial chip. But Slacking will drop to a Thunderbolt here. Of course, the downside to Slacking being faster than everything else on the board is that it's going to be slower in Trick Room. So it doesn't get any attacks off this game. But now we see the Sudowoodo. Just protects. I would love to see the Sudowoodo do something before this season ends. But Trico just protecting through the Trick Room right now. Now we see the Terra Dragon Gyarados, and Sudowoodo misses a Rock Blast. I was kind of rooting for Sudowoodo here, I'm not going to lie, but Gyarados will take that Wild Charge nicely. Stantler knocked out by the Steel Beam. Magneton trading itself for Stantler, but that means there will be no more Trick Room in the set after this one wears off in a couple of turns. Sudowoodo takes a lot from Waterfall, but it's still here with one more turn of Trick Room. That said, I think it's just going to be protects from Trico here. We see the Terra Dragon Corviknight. Oh, the Gyarados doesn't protect, but Sudowoodo attacks the Kilowatt Roll, which does. Gyarados taunts Corviknight. Okay, I guess trying to avoid any late game setup. Or if Trico thinks it's just going to take some time to break through the Corviknight, you also don't want it able to use Roost. The Sudowoodo showing the Sucker Punch. It does get a KO into Gyarados. Sudowoodo goes down to a Thunderbolt after that, but we did see it put in some work before the season is over, which is just what I wanted. And the last Pokemon from the Cryogonals here is, unsurprisingly, Arcanine. Saw that coming. And Arcanine is once again positioned to take advantage of the fact that this Corviknight is already terrestrialized. That's really worked well to Reckless Trico's benefit in these last two games. The Gyarados pressuring the Terra out from Corviknight before Arcanine comes in and has to know how best to attack it. Again, we know now that it's not a choice to Arcanine, so the stakes are a little bit lower, but still forcing out the Terra earlier is nice. It does miss this Head Smash, though. Doesn't take enough back from Iron Head, I think, to salvage this one for the Chatots. And that Thunderbolt is doing some chip as well. But yeah, Arcanine gets the last KO with the Head Smash. The The Steel Beam Magneton definitely did put in work here, but yeah, the Cryptic Cryogonals, once again, bringing just the right tools to overpower anything that their opponent might throw at them. I think if we see, I mean, I keep talking up the peaceful Porygons versus everyone, but I think if we see a playoff set between the Porygons and the Cryogonals, who will be definitely two of the higher seeds going into that final bracket, there are going to be some real fireworks in that one, because both of those teams have shown the value of having a well-rounded, versatile core of Pokemon in this season, and have just overwhelmed so many different opponents as the season has gone on. I think that the Farmboys, the Porygons, the Cryogonals, I wouldn't be surprised to see any of them win the championship this season, although what I really want is a Masquerade Men championship, of course, but I would have my work cut out for me. And one more set this week before we move on. Another extremely well-rounded, versatile, hard-to-deal-with team in the Falinks, taking on a team that had a bit of a rough start to this season, but has nicely climbed back up into the playoff picture in the Drowsy Torkoals. You really can't sleep on anyone this season, and these two teams have both demonstrated that very nicely. On the Falinks side, we have the very scary duo of Electabuzz and Sylveon again. I could see Hyper Voice Sylveon just shredding a lot of what the Torkoals have brought, especially since we know that they like to lean on the duo of Noivern and Shiftry, who are both weak to Fairy and not especially bulky. The Torkoal might be able to stand up better than Sylveon, although it's not as bulky on the special side as it is on the physical one. But then the Falinks also have the Dragapult, able to outspeed anything, at least before Noivern sets Tailwind, and threaten big damage. The Torkoals also have possible Trick Room from the Oranguru, so I actually think I give the Torkoals the edge here in the speed control game. There is the Mudsdale on the Falinks side, which can... Well, actually, this is a tricky one for Mudsdale, right? Because it's weak to the stronger physical attackers. It can play a physically bulky game, but it probably has to Terrasilize to do that against Lilligant or Shiftry. It's also very weak to Clawitzer. It'll be, I think, undersped by Torkoal. Min 36, min 22, yeah. And Torkoal doesn't hit Mudsdale super effectively, at least before Terra with its stab, but it should still be able to do a lot of damage. This feels like a tricky one for the Mudsdale. So yeah, either Tailwind or Trick Room should create favorable positions for the Torkoals here, but Dragapult is very threatening. Absent that, Sylveon is always very threatening. You can barely see the Aqua Breed Tauros in here, but well, it's a mixed bag for that Pokemon into like Shiftry and Noivern. But then the Metagross, you know, the more I look at this, the more I think the Sylveon is extremely threatening. And Electabuzz might be able to give it the support that it needs to win, and Dragapult can complement it nicely, but I'm not sure. I think some of the other Falinks Pokemon are actually hard-pressed to put in work here. I guess it depends to an extent on the specific positions that we see and what the Terra types are and so on, but yeah, if the Torkoals can find a way past the Sylveon, I definitely see a real fighting chance for them here, but I do think the speed control is stronger on their team, and that might make a significant difference. So Electabuzz and Sylveon here taking on Noivern and Shiftry. We see Eviolite Electabuzz, unsurprisingly, and Choice Scarf Sylveon probably is here to just start blasting with Hyper Voice. Terra Fairy Noivern will not be weak to that Hyper Voice anymore, but neither will it resist. They set Tailwind, they get their Wind Rider. Shiftry gets a big knockoff into Electabuzz. That does a lot of damage and removes the Eviolite, so Electabuzz won't be able to just sit here and redirect for a while like it's done in some matchups. But that Hyper Voice does half to Noivern. It knocks Shiftry down to a Focus Sash. It's Sash Shiftry. That might make a real difference here in just getting enough damage out before the Sylveon starts taking KOs. Noivern protects. Is Shiftry going to explode? Yes! That's such a good use of Explosion Shiftry. In earlier weeks of the season, we saw the Shiftry just explode immediately once it got its Wind Rider boost. And then for a little while, the Torkoals kind of shifted away from playing Shiftry that way, and we didn't see the explosion as much at all. But here, Shiftry lands a huge knockoff turn 1, and then it shows the explosion after that, and it's able to remove the Choice Scarf Sylveon that I talked up as such a threat, and the Electabuzz is weakened. I really like the way Panda played the Shiftry in this game. That was very good. Now we see Lilligant still in Tailwind against Metagross. Metagross will, I was going to say knock Noivern out with a Bullet Punch, but it actually doesn't KO, even at 50%. So Noivern is able to knock out the Electabuzz. Lilligant lands a close combat that does about half to Metagross. We see Mudsdale last on the Falinks side. That said, the last Pokemon for the Torkoals is Torkoal, so Shiftry's gone. They don't have Clawitzer in this game. Mudsdale may yet be able to pull this one back, especially with no Trick Room on the board, but I'm not sure. Metagross Bullet Punch honestly does less than I expected to Lilligant, considering Lilligant dropped his defense. And we see a big Solar Blade. Does a ton of damage to Mudsdale. I'm not sure Mudsdale can pull this one back. That Rock Slide doesn't do a whole lot. But, hang on. Let me go back for a sec. Okay, yeah, the Rock Slide did put Lilligant in Bullet Punch range, so that could be significant. Metagross is able to KO the Lilligant here. Mudsdale knocks out the Torkoal with a high horsepower. I talk up Torkoal's physical bulk, didn't take that very well. And it's just the 2% Noivern left, so Mudsdale, despite taking a ton of damage from that Solar Blade, it is able to put in just enough work. Again, knocking Lilligant down to Bullet Punch range, and then knocking out the Torkoal. And now a Bullet Punch will finish off this Noivern, and the Falinks will take game 1. We see that it's Assault Vest Noivern and Safety Goggles Mudsdale, so at least they know not to click Sleep Powder into the Mudsdale. Not that they seem to want to do that anyway. Assault Vest Metagross. That's going to be an interesting one for them to try to deal with. And yeah, the Falinks, the Choice Scarf Sylveon went down relatively early that game. I loved that Shiftry play, but the Falinks showing that they do have more threats than just that. So it's going to be tricky for both teams still. Here we go in game 2 now. Dragapult and Electabuzz leading against Clawitzer and Oranguru. Will we see Trick Room? Terra Steel Oranguru, I guess trying to make sure it takes a Dragon Darts well. Or a Draco Meteor, but we do just see the Draco Meteor into Clawitzer there, which does take that pretty well, I think. Electabuzz taunts Oranguru. Is there a Mental Herb? No. So no Trick Room immediately. Get Mudsdale in. And Electabuzz makes sure it can get in safely. Now here's the Shiftry. Electabuzz chipping these Pokemon down and lowering their speed. Electabuzz taking a lot of damage, but it is putting in some good work. It's actually still on the field after all those attacks. Shiftry gets chipped down nicely by a Body Press. We see Oranguru come back. Electabuzz is still able to click that taunt though. The Shiftry goes down after failing a Sucker Punch. But Oranguru protects, and if they knock out Electabuzz here, there's probably no more taunt. Yep. Mudsdale might have been able to KO Clawitzer back. I don't know the damage calculation there, of course, but tries to snipe the Oranguru instead, but it and Electabuzz are both thwarted by the Protect. Here's the Sylveon. We know it's running a Choice Scarf, and of course Oranguru with the Terra Steel not only takes Dragon attacks from the Dragapult batter, but it also doesn't have to be afraid of the Sylveon's Fairy coverage, so it makes a lot of sense to have some Terra Steel mixed in for the Torkoals this week when the Sylveon is, I think, the most obvious threat. But Sylveon will lock itself into Moonblast. We know it has a Choice Scarf, so it's not able to switch moves unless it manages to switch out, and it doesn't quite get the KO on the Clawitzer. Clawitzer is taking these special attacks so incredibly well. I don't know Clawitzer's stats. I'm just going to guess now that it's running an Assault Vest, though. It doesn't quite get the KO on Mudsdale, though, with that Water Pulse. But the Water Pulse, of course, might look weird, but Clawitzer is Mega Launcher, so Water Pulse is buffed, but not enough to KO this Mudsdale. That said, even +1 Body Press into Oranguru doesn't do enough to that Pokemon, and the Trick Room finally goes up. Mudsdale misses a Rock Slide into Clawitzer. That is unfortunate for the Falinks. Knocking out Clawitzer here could definitely have been significant. That said, Clawitzer just going for a Dark Pulse into Sylveon doesn't do that much. But Mudsdale goes down here. Sylveon flinches. As it is, though, Sylveon is in some trouble here with a Choice Scarf in Trick Room, locked into a Fairy-type attack against the Steel Oranguru. Here's Dragapult, but the Falinks are now down to 2 very fast Pokemon. So they're really... And the Sylveon certainly can't protect. We must have seen Dragapult's item, right? Did we not? I don't know whether the Dragapult can protect. We know that the Sylveon can't. Terra Dragon Dragapult. Does turn off its weakness to that Dark Pulse, but with Instruct, doesn't matter. Can't take 2 of them. So, well, I don't think we know the Torkoal's last Pokemon. In this game plan, I would guess is probably Torkoal. I'm trying to think about how much it matters that Mudsdale missed the Rock Slide that would have knocked out the Clawitzer. I think that might well actually have been significant to this game. The Clawitzer does go down now, but it managed to knock out Dragapult first, and we do see Torkoal in the back. And Sylveon just drops to that Eruption crit. So, great adjustments from the Drowsy Torkoals, and again, the thing that stood out most to me at preview was how threatening the Sylveon was, but they've handled it very nicely in both games so far. And let's see if they can do it a third time. Electabuzz leading with Sylveon against Torkoal and Shiftry. Shiftry going straight for Terra Dark, that's interesting. But of course, we know it doesn't have Chlorophyll, and we know that the Sylveon has a Choice Scarf, so this Hyper Voice comes out first. And then Electabuzz knocks Shiftry out. So whatever Shiftry was planning here, it's not going to work, as both of these Pokemon outspeed it with no Tailwind up. And not the best use of your Terra as the Drowsy Torkoals here. That's not available for the rest of the game. But maybe Lilligant could do something about the Sylveon here. I'm a bit surprised to see the Terra Rock. If Lilligant had just attacked Sylveon, that would have been a liability. But we see already that Lilligant is instead going for After You. So Sylveon, which is a especially bulky Pokemon to begin with, will resist this Eruption. And it'll knock out the Lilligant with Hyper Voice. Of course, Lilligant doesn't have the Focus Sash because Shiftry does. So yeah. If Lilligant had just clicked Solar Blade into Sylveon, Sylveon just drops after terrestrializing into a Rock type. But my best guess as to why they didn't is because the Electabuzz is here and it was threatening Follow Me. We see that it didn't click Follow Me, but yeah, I might do the same thing. You know, I talk a lot about the different decisions that the players have made in these sets. I think there's a very good chance I make exactly the same play if I'm in Panda's position, though, because I'm thinking they're just going to redirect the Solar Blade, so I need to make the most of this Eruption. And that plays perfectly into the Falinks' hands, as the Terra Rock Sylveon looks a little bit risky at first, but pays off very nicely here. Takes out the Lilligant. Electabuzz taunts the Torkoal. I guess either anticipating a yawn or taunting the other slot, thinking that Oranguru might come in. Or even that Sylveon might, or that Lilligant might, Sleep Powder Sylveon. I don't know. There are a few different things that they could be covering for with that taunt. It comes out looking a little weird here, but I don't think it's a bad play. And now here's the Noivern. But, of course, it can't terrestrialize in this game like it did in Game 1, because the Terra's already been used. Torkoal getting worn down nicely by the Hyper Voice, and if it does have Yawn, it can't click that because it's taunted. Solar Beam doesn't do too much to Electabuzz. This kind of suggests that Torkoal is not running a less situational Fire-type attack, like a Heat Wave or a Flamethrower. If it's instead going to Weather Ball into Electabuzz, or maybe it was trying to... Actually, it was probably just trying to Solar Beam Sylveon. They did click the Follow Me that turn. So that's probably all it is. Torkoal trying to Solar Beam the Sylveon. But now... I mean, by the way, this is Falinks' co-coach Shadow, the creator of the PDL, playing this week. I don't recall whether he's played before this season, but he has been a Falinks coach all along. And playing the redirection game really nicely there. The threat of it alone was enough to handle the Lilligant last turn, and now it comes out for real when I think they did try to Solar Beam the Sylveon. So playing that mind game very well here. And Sylveon is free to just knock out Noivern, chip Torkoal down, take that Eruption like it's nothing. Metagross comes in, but Choice Scarf Sylveon. Oh, it actually Bullet Punches. Doesn't quite, even with a crit, doesn't quite KO though. And Choice Scarf Sylveon able to close this one out. Really solid offensive gameplay there from Shadow. And someone who has, in recent seasons, largely stepped away from the league, I think due to becoming busier in his offline life. So I'm really impressed to see him step in late in the season and play this team this way. And it's good to see you. If you're watching this, good to see that you're still around when you can be. But yeah, the Falinks do defeat the Drowsy Torkoals here. And I can tell you that is going to have implications for the playoff seeding, as I'll show you the final bracket before we call it a week here. This is now officially the playoff field for Prismatic Draft League Season 7. And they are listed in seeding order here, so as you can see, our Halifax Masquerade Men will be the number 6 seed and will face none other than the Falinks in the quarterfinals. It's going to be a tough one for sure. All of these top teams are hard to attack in various ways. And yeah, the Falinks are going to be no exception. I believe we did not play them during the regular season. And yeah, that Electabuzz Sylveon duo is really going to be something, to say nothing of, you know, all the rest of their Pokemon, like Dragapult and Metagross and Tauros. It's going to be an interesting one, but it's going to be an interesting quarterfinal round across the board here, as the Peaceful Porygons take on the Regional Reshurams, the Cryptic Cryogonals, the Drowsy Torkoals, and the Varsity Farmboys take on the Foraging Furrets. I don't even know what to say. It's just going to be nothing but highlight matchups the whole way, but I need to get in the lab quickly now and figure out what I'm going to do about this very challenging Falinks roster. And I know several other people are going to be trying to crack some difficult puzzles themselves. So, quarterfinals next week. I'm looking forward to it. I hope you are too. These are the playoff teams. Congratulations to all. And nothing to do now but play out that knockout bracket. Winner takes all.